On the morning of March 4th, 2024, my son-in-law sat across from me at my own kitchen table, poured himself a cup of coffee from my percolator, and told me that at 67 years old, I was no longer capable of managing my own finances. He said it gently. That was the worst part. The way he folded his hands on the table like a banker, like someone who was doing me a favor, and said, "Estelle, we've been worried about you. The bills, the accounts. It's a lot for one person." I didn't say anything right away. I looked at my daughter, sitting beside him, not quite meeting my eyes. She was stirring her coffee even though she didn't take sugar. I said, "Is that so?" He said, "We just think it would be easier for everyone if you let us help manage things. Simplify." Simplify. Like I was a problem that needed solving. What I didn't say, what I had already started to understand, was that my accounts had been losing money for 6 months. Small amounts at first, $60 here, $140 there. The kind of amounts a woman my age might not notice, might chalk up to a forgotten subscription, a misremembered purchase. I noticed. My name is Estelle Beaumont Crawford. I am 67 years old. I was a registered nurse for 31 years. I raised my daughter alone after her father died. I bought this house in 1988 with money I saved over 8 years working double shifts at County General, and I've never once in my life needed anyone to simplify anything for me. But I smiled. I said, "Let me think about it." And I went upstairs and started making calls. The house on Caldwell Street had been mine since the year my daughter Renee turned 4. 3 bedrooms, a yard with a fig tree. My mother planted the summer she came to stay with us. Hardwood floors I refinished myself in 2001 when I had a bad knee and did it anyway. My late husband Harold never lived in this house. He passed before we could buy it, but his life insurance made the down payment possible. So in a way, this house was his too. Always felt that way to me. Renee grew up here, learned to ride her bike in this driveway, brought home every stray cat in a 3-block radius, left for college from this front door with a duffel bag and a $20 bill I slipped into her pocket because I knew she wouldn't ask for more. I was proud of her. Still am, in the way that doesn't go away no matter what. She met her husband. I'll call him my son-in-law because that's what he is, legally, about 8 years ago. His name is Christopher. He sells commercial real estate. He is the kind of man who always seems to be waiting for you to finish your sentence so he can explain why you're wrong. But Renee loved him, and I trusted her judgment. I made a mistake trusting her judgment. About 2 years into their marriage, they asked if they could stay with me for a while. Christopher's firm was relocating. They were between leases. It would only be 6 months. I said yes. Of course I said yes. She was my daughter. The 6 months became 14 months. Then it just became the arrangement. They paid no rent. I never asked for any. They were family. What I didn't know until March of this year was that Christopher had been paying himself back for that generosity in other ways. I want to be precise about the money, because precision matters. November 12th, 2023, my checking account showed a transfer of $60 to an account I didn't recognize. I called the bank. They said it was an authorized transfer. I said I didn't authorize it. They said the transfer was initiated from my online banking portal. December 3rd, another transfer, $140. December 28th, $200. January 15th, 2024, $85. February 2nd, $310. February 19th, $425. In total, between November and March, $1,860 had left my account in transfers I had not made. I hadn't said a word to anyone. I started keeping a notebook. Dates, amounts, confirmation numbers. My grandmother used to say, "Baby, always write it down, because the day will come when someone looks you in the eye and tells you what you know didn't happen." She was right. That day was March 4th. After Christopher talked to me about simplifying my finances, after Renee wouldn't look at me over her coffee cup, I went upstairs and closed my bedroom door and called my friend Josephine. Joe and I had known each other since our girls were in the same 3rd grade class at Martin Luther King Elementary. She'd been a paralegal for 22 years before she retired. She knew things. "Joe," I said, "I need you to help me understand something." I told her about the transfers, about Christopher's little speech that morning, About the online banking portal. She was quiet for a moment. Estelle, she said, did you ever give Christopher access to your online banking? No, no. Did you ever give him your login? No, no. Another pause, longer this time. Has he ever used your computer? I thought about it. His laptop had been in for repairs last October. He'd used mine for 3 days. Yes, I said. She made a sound. The kind of sound that means she already knows the shape of what you're dealing with, and it is not good. You need a lawyer, she said. Not tomorrow. Today. Call Deborah Price. Tell her I sent you. Deborah Price's office was on the 12th floor of a building downtown, the kind of building with a security desk and real art on the walls. She was in her mid-50s, dark skin, natural hair going silver at the temples, reading glasses she wore on a beaded chain. She shook my hand like she meant it. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I was done, she said, Mrs. Crawford, do you have documentation of these transfers? I put my notebook on her desk. She read through it, then turned to her computer and typed for a few minutes. I want to pull your account history going back 18 months, she said. Will you authorize that? I said yes. She made some calls, sent some emails, asked me to come back in 2 days. When I came back, she had a printed report on her desk, 8 pages. Estelle, she said, the transfers go back further than you thought. She turned the report toward me. The first unauthorized transfer was dated August 6, 2022, 16 months ago. Total amount transferred out, $6,140. I sat with that number for a moment. $6,840, the equivalent of 4 months of my pension. Gone. He would have had access to your saved login credentials when he used your laptop, Deborah said. It's not complicated to do. He saved your password, set up a secondary account, and moved money in amounts small enough not to trigger automatic fraud alerts. She leaned forward. This is theft, Estelle. The fact that he lives in your house and is married to your daughter does not change what this is. I looked at the fig tree through her window. Not her fig tree, the one on the building's courtyard, but I thought of mine anyway. What do I do? I said. She pulled out a legal pad. First, we change everything. Your banking password, your online portal, your email, today before you go home. Second, we open a new account at a different bank entirely and move your direct deposits there. Third, we document everything we have and file a formal fraud complaint with your bank. Fourth, she paused. Fourth, we talk about the house. The house was where it got complicated. In 2021, I had added Renee to the deed. Just Renee, not Christopher. She'd been going through a hard time that year, some health issues, some medical bills I'd helped with, and I thought, in that tired, grieving way that mothers sometimes think, that I wanted her to be protected if something happened to me. I trusted her. What I hadn't fully understood was that Christopher, as her spouse, had certain rights in community property states when it came to marital assets. It wasn't as simple as I'd thought. Deborah explained it carefully. In our state, a spouse's interest in a jointly owned property could become complicated during divorce proceedings or debt collection. If Christopher ever faced a judgment, creditors could potentially come after Renee's interest in the house. And if I wanted to sell, I'd need Renee's signature. Can he force a sale? I asked. Not directly, Deborah said, but a messy legal situation could make it very difficult for you to move freely with your own asset. More importantly, what I'm seeing here suggests a pattern of financial exploitation. And if he's been this systematic about small transfers, I want to know if there's anything else. She pulled up another document. I ran a lien search on the property, she said. I had not asked her to do that. I was glad she had. She turned the screen toward me. There was a lien on my house, $22,000, filed 7 months ago by a company called Westbridge Capital Solutions, a company I had never heard of. My stomach dropped. Do you have any business dealings with Westbridge Capital Solutions? Deborah asked. I've never heard that name in my life. She nodded slowly. Neither had I, so I looked them up. It's a holding company registered in Delaware, shell company. The principal listed is a man named Christopher Allen Merritt. I stared at her. My son-in-law's middle name is Alan. He filed a fraudulent lien against your property, Deborah said, using a shell company he controls, most likely to cloud the title, make it difficult for you to sell or refinance without dealing with him. If you ever tried to access your equity or sell the house, Westbridge would need to be paid off first. I thought about that morning, about the folded hands, the word simplify. He had been planning this, not for months, for years. I drove home slowly. Renee's car was in the driveway. Christopher's was gone. He had showings on Tuesdays. I came inside, set my purse down, poured myself a glass of water, stood at the kitchen sink and looked out at the fig tree. My mother had planted that tree the summer she stayed with us after her knee surgery. She said figs were patient trees. They take years to fruit, but once they do, they keep giving. I thought about patience, about what it looks like when it's finished. Renee came into the kitchen. She was wearing her work clothes, lanyards still around her neck. She worked in hospital administration. I had helped her get that job, actually. Called in a favor from someone I'd known for 20 years at County General. "Hey, Mama, how was your day?" "Sit down, baby," I said. She looked at my face and sat down. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I laid out on the kitchen table everything Deborah had found, the transfers going back to August 2022, the total amount, the shell company, the lien. Renee's face went through several phases, confusion first, then a kind of slow dawning understanding that was painful to watch, then something that looked like shame. "Mama," she said, "I didn't know about any of this." "I know you didn't," I said, "because I did know. I knew my daughter. She had many faults, but she was not a thief." "But you knew things weren't right," I said. "That's why you couldn't look at me this morning." She was quiet. "He's been talking about the house," she said finally. "For a while now, about equity, about how we could renovate, refinance. He said you were sitting on all this value and not doing anything with it. He said—" She stopped. "What did he say?" She looked at the table. "He said women your age don't realize how vulnerable they are, that they need people to manage things for them. He said it was better for you." I let those words sit in the air between us. "Renee. He stole $6,840 from my account. He filed a fraudulent lien on my house using a shell company with his name on it. And this morning he sat at my kitchen table and told me I was too confused to handle my own money." She put her hand over her mouth. "He was going to do it again," I said. "If I'd let him take over my accounts, you wouldn't have known until it was too late, and neither would I. What happened next, I will tell you plainly, without drama, because the facts are dramatic enough on their own. Deborah filed a fraud complaint with my bank. The bank opened a formal investigation. The unauthorized transfers were flagged and my account was temporarily frozen pending review. But importantly, Deborah had already moved my direct deposit to the new account at a different institution. My pension arrived safely on the 1st of the month. She filed to have the fraudulent lien removed. The process took 3 weeks, but because the lien had been filed under a shell company with falsified documentation, they had used a forged notarization, it was removed. Westbridge Capital Solutions was referred to the State Attorney General's office for further investigation. I changed every password I had. Online banking, email, the Wi-Fi password in my house. And then I had a locksmith come on a Wednesday morning when Christopher had a 9 a.m. meeting across town. The locksmith changed every lock in the house, front door, back door, the side entrance to the garage, in 45 minutes. I had Deborah send a certified letter to Christopher's office that same afternoon. The letter informed him that effective immediately he was no longer a welcome resident at 1427 Caldwell Street. It outlined the legal basis for the removal, cited the ongoing fraud investigation, and gave him 72 hours to collect his personal belongings, with a witness present. I was sitting on my porch with a cup of tea when he pulled into the driveway that evening. He tried his key first, stood there for a moment looking at the door like it had personally offended him. Then he looked up and saw me. I raised my cup. He walked toward me. His face was doing something I hadn't seen before. The smooth confidence was gone, replaced by something raw and calculating, a man deciding which version of himself to try. "Estelle," he said. The certified letter explains everything, I said. Deborah Price's number is on it if you have questions. We need to talk about this. No, we don't. Renee. What? Is inside, and this is not her decision. He stood on the bottom step. He was a tall man, Christopher. He had always used his height in small ways, leaning over a conversation, taking up space. It had never worked on me. I spent 31 years on hospital floors. I have stood next to people in the worst moments of their lives, and I did not flinch. A man on my front steps was not going to rattle me. You can't prove anything, he said. The bank's fraud investigation disagrees, I said pleasantly. So does the Attorney General's office. It's all in the letter. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he went to his car, made a phone call I couldn't hear, and drove away. He came back on Friday with his brother to collect his things. I was home. Deborah had advised me to be present. I sat in the kitchen and drank coffee while they carried boxes out. It took about 2 hours. When they were done, his brother nodded at me on the way out. Not unkindly. I thought he looked relieved. Renee stayed. That surprised some people. Joe asked me about it gently over the phone. Wasn't I angry with her? I thought about it, honestly. She didn't steal from me, I said. She turned a blind eye, which is different. That's something we can work on. It wasn't easy. For the first few weeks, we moved around each other carefully, like people recovering from something, which is what we were. She cried more than once. I let her, and didn't say too much. There is a time for talking and a time for letting feelings run their course. What I needed from her was honesty, and in pieces, she gave it to me. She told me Christopher had been pressuring her for over a year to get me to sign over power of attorney. She'd refused. She hadn't known about the transfers or the lien, but she had known he talked about my house like it was a resource to be accessed. She told herself he was just thinking about the future. She told herself a lot of things. I should have told you, she said one evening. We were sitting on the back porch, the fig tree going soft in the September dusk. Even the parts I was afraid of, I should have told you. Yes, I said. You should have. I'm sorry, Mama. I reached over and took her hand. I know you are, and I'm not going anywhere. But Renee, you have to understand that what almost happened here was serious. Not just the money, the house. Your father's life insurance bought this house. 30 years of my work kept this house. If I had let Christopher control my accounts, if that lien had gone undetected, I could have lost everything at 67 years old, with nowhere to go. She squeezed my hand. I won't let that happen again. No, I said, you won't, because I'm not going to make it possible. I had already had the deed updated. Deborah had helped me transfer the property into a revocable living trust, the Estelle H. Crawford Living Trust. I controlled it completely. Renee was named as successor trustee, but with specific conditions. Christopher had no claim on it, no access, no path in. Not now, not ever. Whatever I left behind would go where I chose, not where someone else maneuvered it. The bank investigation concluded in November. The unauthorized transfers were confirmed as fraudulent. My bank reimbursed me the full $6,840. They filed a suspicious activity report with federal authorities. Whether Christopher faces criminal charges, I do not know. That is not in my hands. What I know is that my money is mine. My house is mine. My name is on a trust, not a transfer form someone else filled out. Joe came by for dinner the week after the investigation closed. I made stuffed pork chops, the kind with cornbread dressing, and sweet potato pie. She brought a bottle of sweet red wine. I don't usually drink, but made an exception for. We sat at my kitchen table, and I thought about how many people had sat at this table over the years. My mother with her bad knee and her opinions. Harold before he got sick. Rennie at every age from 4 to 35. And Joe, who has been sitting at this table since the Clinton administration. How are you feeling? She asked. Steady, I said. And that was the right word, not triumphant, not bitter. Steady. There was one more thing I did. In January, quietly, Rainey and I had talked about what would happen to the house eventually. She didn't need to inherit a property outright. What she needed was security. What I wanted was for the next generation to have something real. My granddaughter Amani is 11 years old, Rene's daughter from a relationship before Christopher. She calls me Nana Estelle, and she has her great-grandmother's gap between her front teeth, and she wants to be a marine biologist. I amended the trust. Primary beneficiary Amani Josephine Holt, to be administered until her 21st birthday, at which point she receives full access. With conservative management, the trust's assets, the house, my savings, the reimbursed funds, should give her a foundation that nobody can take. I wrote her a letter. I'll put it with the trust documents. January 14th, 2025. My darling Amani, if you're reading this, you're grown, and I am either very old or gone, and either way, I'm proud of you. Inside this envelope, you'll find information about a trust I set up in your name. There is money in it, and depending on how the years have gone, it may be more than you expect. Use it wisely. Use it for something that matters. Use it for your education, or your first home, or your business, or whatever dream you're carrying when you open this. I want you to know something about the woman who left this for you. When I was 67 years old, someone tried to take what I built. Not a stranger, someone who was supposed to be family. They thought because I was older, because I was a woman, because I had been generous for years, that I wouldn't notice, wouldn't push back, wouldn't fight. They were wrong. I noticed. I called a lawyer. I changed the locks. I protected what was mine, not because I was angry, but because I understood something that took me a long time to learn. Your love for someone and your legal rights are two separate things. Guard them both. The world will tell you to be agreeable, especially if you are a black woman, especially if you are kind. They will call it wisdom when they mean compliance. They will call it help when they mean control. Know the difference. Keep your documents. Know what you own. Read what you sign, and find one good lawyer and one good friend who will tell you the truth even when it's hard to hear. I love you more than I have words for. Nama Estelle. P.S. The fig tree in the backyard needs a good pruning every February. Your great-grandmother planted it. It still fruits every summer. Some things are just stubborn that way, and that's not a flaw. It is April now. The fig tree is leafing out, the way it does every spring. Slowly at first, then all at once. Rene had a friend from work over for dinner last week, and I made my cornbread, and nobody complained. Amani came on Saturday and we watched a documentary about the ocean, and she asked me 47 questions about bioluminescence, and I answered every one I could and made up the rest. Christopher's divorce attorney sent a letter in February. Rene has her own lawyer now, Joe's nephew, who does family law and does it well. That process will take as long as it takes. I still drink my coffee the same way I always have. 1 sugar, a little cream, the same percolator I've had since 2009. Some mornings I sit on the back porch before the neighborhood wakes up, just me and the fig tree and the early light coming over the fence. Harold used to say there was nothing better than morning quiet. He was right about that. I spent 31 years in a profession that asked me to give everything I had to people who needed it. And I did, willingly. That part of my character did not go away when I retired, and it is not something I regret. But there is a difference between choosing to give and being slowly, quietly taken from. I know that difference now in a way I didn't before, not because I became harder, because I finally accepted that taking care of myself is not a betrayal of the people I love. It is, in fact, the only way I can keep loving them honestly. The house on Caldwell Street is still mine. The fig tree still fruits every summer. My granddaughter is going to grow up with something real behind her. And I did not need anyone's permission for any of it. I think about the morning of March 4th more than I expected to, not with anger anymore. That part settled a long time ago. I think about it the way you think about a moment that clarified something you should have known, something that was always true but needed the right pressure to come into focus. What Christopher did was wrong. That is simple. He stole from me in small amounts, carefully, the way someone does when they're counting on you not to look too closely. He filed a lien on my house using a company that had his own middle name in it, which tells you everything you need to know about how safe he felt doing it. He sat at my kitchen table and called his theft concern. He dressed it up in language about my age, my vulnerability, my need for someone to manage things. And the worst part, the part I've had to sit with, is that it almost worked. Not because I was foolish, because I was trusting. Those are not the same thing, and it took me longer than it should have to understand that. There's a cause and effect to everything, and I've watched it play out clearly in the time since. Christopher made choices, deliberate, calculated, repeated choices, and those choices had a direction. They were building toward something. The moment I stopped going along with it, the moment I picked up the phone and called Joe and then called Deborah, I changed the direction. That's what action does. It redirects the outcome. Nobody handed me back my $6,840. Nobody filed the fraud complaint for me. Nobody changed those locks except the locksmith I hired and the decision I made to hire him. I think about the kind of person it takes to do what I did, and I want to be honest about it because I think women my age are often expected to be modest about our own competence. The truth is, it required 3 things from me, and none of them came easy in the moment. It required me to trust what I knew was right, even when Christopher sat across from me with his folded hands and his reasonable voice, and made me feel like I was the problem. The ethical thing, the honest thing, was not to smooth it over and keep the peace. It was to name what was happening and respond to it truthfully. That took something out of me. I don't pretend it didn't. It required me to think clearly under pressure, to read documents, to ask the right questions, to call Deborah and understand what she was telling me about liens and shell companies and trust structures. I am 67 years old, and I had never heard the phrase revocable living trust in a personal context before that October. I learned it. I signed it. I understood what I was signing. That kind of clear-headed thinking doesn't happen automatically. You have to insist on it, especially when someone has spent months trying to convince you that your thinking can't be trusted. And it required me to keep going even when it was hard. Even when Renee and I were tiptoeing around each other in our own kitchen. Even when the investigation was taking weeks. Even when I sat alone on the back porch some evenings, wondering if I had broken something that couldn't be repaired. I kept going. That stubbornness, and I'll call it what it is not a character flaw. It is the thing that kept my house mine. It is the thing that will give Amani something real when she turns 21. I spent 31 years as a nurse. I know what it looks like when someone is genuinely trying to help you and when someone is performing concern for their own benefit. I knew that morning. I just needed a few hours to trust what I knew. I don't have regrets about any of it. Not the locks, not the certified letter, not a single thing. What I have is a fig tree that fruits every summer, a granddaughter who asks me 47 questions about the ocean, and a deed to a house that has my name on it and nobody else's unless I choose otherwise. That is enough, more than enough. It always was.